The world you know is only a surface. Beneath the hills and valleys, beyond the cities ruled by law and magic, lie secrets older than memory itself. Bloodlines erased, songs forgotten, and powers hidden, waiting for the moment to awaken. This is the story of Max of Illir Valley, a man shaped by love, broken by loss, and reborn through the fire of ancestral magic. He will rise as a force the world never anticipated. Listen closely. The winds carry whispers, the ashes remember, and the reckoning is only beginning. Shadow of the Ashen Father, Book 1. Chapter 1. What the World Allowed. The world did not feel broken where Max lived. That, more than anything else, was why no one saw the danger coming. The Valley of Illir rested between low green hills and ancient oaks, whose roots twisted so deeply into the earth that even the oldest maps named them simply there. Trade roads passed nearby but never through, and the great cities of Iteris felt impossibly distant, places of stone towers, sanctioned mages, and laws written by people who had never knelt in dirt. Here, life was quieter. Max rose with the sun, as he always did, before the bells rang from the village square. He stepped outside barefoot, letting the cold grass wake him properly, and breathed in the scent of soil and wood smoke. His cottage stood sturdy behind him, stone walls worn smooth by time and care. He had built it himself years ago, before Osiris was born, when his hands were rougher and his dreams simpler. Inside, Julia was already awake. He could hear her humming through the open window, one of her old songs, soft and lilting, with a rhythm that didn't quite match the work of kneading dough. Max paused as he always did, listening until the tune ended. "You're staring again," Julia called without turning. He smiled and went inside. The kitchen was warm, sunlight spilling across the table where Zara sat cross-legged, carefully braiding a length of twine into something that might one day become a bracelet. Osiris was outside, attempting to split kindling with an axe nearly as tall as he was. Max crossed the room and kissed Julia's cheek. "You hum louder every year," he said. "That's because you're getting older," she replied, brushing flour from her hands. "Your hearing's going." He laughed, the sound easy, unguarded. This was the shape of his life. Not grand, not powerful, but whole. Outside, Osiris beamed when Max took the axe and showed him how to angle the blade properly. Zara watched from the doorway, eyes sharp, always observing. She asked questions endlessly. About the hills, about the traders who passed through, about why some people wore sigil-marked rings and others did not. "Because they're sanctioned," Julia answered gently when Zara asked that one. "It means they're allowed." Zara frowned. "Allowed by who?" Julia hesitated, just for a moment. "By the world as it is," she said. Max didn't notice the tension in her voice. He was too busy steadying Osiris's hands, too busy believing that the rules of distant cities would never reach them. Later that morning, a caravan passed along the road beyond the fields. Sanctioned mages rode at its center, their cloaks marked with runes that shimmered faintly in the daylight. The villagers paused to watch them pass. Not with fear, but with the quiet respect taught by years of stability. Order had a look to it. Clean lines, polished symbols, power without mess. Max felt Zara's grip tighten on his hand. "They feel heavy," she whispered. He crouched beside her. "What does?" "The air." Max smiled. "You're imagining things." But Julia did not look at the caravan. Her gaze lingered instead on the sigils, her song from earlier unfinished on her lips. That evening, after the children slept, Julia sat beside Max beneath the old oak behind their cottage. Fireflies drifted between the roots like fallen stars. The valley was quiet again, the way it was supposed to be. "Do you ever feel like we're borrowing this?" Julia asked softly. "Borrowing what?" "This life," she said. "Like it's been permitted." Max frowned. "From who?" She shook her head. "I don't know, sometimes it feels like the world is counting." Max took her hand. "You worry too much." Julia smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. She began to hum again, an older song this time, one she rarely sang aloud. The melody curled into the night, sinking into the roots of the oak, into the stone beneath the soil. Far away, sanctioned instruments shuddered. No alarms sounded. No riders were dispatched. Only a single line updated itself in a ledger never meant to be read by common eyes. Max slept easily that night. He dreamed of nothing at all. And somewhere beyond the valley, something patient turned its attention. Not to the family, but to the bloodline. Chapter 2. When Order Took Notice. The first sign was not fire, it was precision. 2 days after the caravan passed, riders arrived from the south, 4 of them cloaked in the muted grays of civil administration rather than the polished blues of sanctioned mages. They carried no banners, only sealed satchels and the quiet authority of people accustomed to obedience. The village gathered as they always did, curious but unafraid. Visitors were rare, but not unheard of. Trade passed nearby, and census riders came every few years to count crops, record births, confirm names. Order in Iteris was not cruel. It was thorough. Max watched from the edge of the square as the riders dismounted. Zara stood close to him, her fingers curled into his sleeve. "They feel heavier than the others," she whispered. Max almost laughed. "You've decided you're an expert now?" She shook her head. "No, just careful." At the center of the square, the lead rider unrolled a parchment and began calling names. Households stepped forward one by one, answering questions that seemed ordinary enough. Ages, trades, lineage traced back 2 generations at most. When Julia's name was spoken, she stiffened. Max felt it through her hand before he saw it on her face. They stepped forward together. The questions came calmly. Had either of them ever traveled beyond the valley? Did they possess relics, heirlooms, or inherited artifacts? Had any member of their household experienced unusual dreams, visions, or sensations? No, Max answered easily. Julia echoed him, her voice steady. The rider nodded, made a small notation, and moved on. It should have ended there, but as they turned to leave, the rider paused. "Your wife sings," he said conversationally. Julia stopped. Max frowned. "Most people do." The rider smiled faintly. "Yes, but not all songs are remembered." The moment stretched, thin, tight, dangerous. Then the rider inclined his head and walked away. That night, Julia did not sing. Sleep came poorly. Max woke before dawn with the uneasy sense that the valley had shifted while he slept, like furniture rearranged in the dark. Outside, the wind whispered through the oaks in a way that sounded almost deliberate. Julia sat upright beside him, already awake. "I shouldn't have sung that song," she said quietly. Max rubbed his face. "You're overthinking this. They were census riders." "They weren't," she replied. "They were listeners." He frowned. Listeners for what? Julia looked at their children sleeping nearby, then away. "For blood," she said. Max almost laughed, but something in her voice stopped him. "Julia," he said gently, "you're scaring yourself." She reached for his hand. "If anything happens, nothing's going to happen." She searched his face as if memorizing it. By midday, the valley felt watched. It wasn't obvious. Life continued. Fields worked, children played, but people spoke more quietly, glanced toward the road more often. A second caravan passed without stopping, its sanctioned mages staring straight ahead, expressions unreadable. Zara refused to leave Julia's side. Osiris grew uncharacteristically silent. When Max asked what was wrong, Zara answered without looking up. "The ground is remembering," she said. Max knelt in front of her. "Remembering what?" She shrugged. "That we're here." The horn sounded at dusk. Not the village horn, not a call to gather or warn of fire. This was lower, older. It rolled across the valley like a judgment pronounced by the hills themselves. Birds fled the trees in a screaming cloud. The earth trembled, not violently but deliberately. Julia stood so fast her chair toppled. "Take the children," she said. "Go, now." Max hesitated. "Julia." She grabbed his face, forced him to look at her. "If they ask you questions, answer nothing." "Who is they?" She kissed him once, fiercely. "I love you." The horn sounded again, closer. Max gathered Osiris and Zara, heart pounding now, instinct screaming that something had gone terribly wrong. Outside, the village square erupted into chaos as figures crested the hills, black armor catching the dying light, sigils etched so deeply into steel they seemed grown rather than forged. They did not run. They advanced. Max turned back toward the cottage and saw flames rise where the old oak stood. Chapter 3. The day the valley ended. The horn did not stop. It pulsed through the valley in slow, deliberate intervals, each note settling deeper into Max's chest than the last. By the time he reached the cottage door with Osiris in his arms and Zara clutching his side, smoke was already staining the sky. The village was breaking apart, not in panic, yet, but in fragments. People ran without direction, shouting names, dragging children by the hand. Livestock scattered, sensing what the humans could not yet accept. The air carried the sharp smell of burning pitch and something older beneath it, iron and ozone, like a storm about to strike. Max pushed the children inside. "Stay here," he said, already moving toward the back of the cottage where the tools were kept. Zara grabbed his sleeve. "They know," she said. Her voice was steady in a way no child's should have been. "They already know." "Know what?" he demanded. "That we remember." Before he could ask what she meant, a shadow passed over the doorway. Max turned. Julia stood there, framed by firelight, her face pale but her posture unbroken. "They're not here for the village," she said. "They're here for blood." Another horn blast, closer now. Max's hands curled into fists. "Then we hide. We take the old trail through the oaks." Julia shook her head. "No." She crossed the room, knelt in front of Osiris and Zara, and took their faces in her hands. "Listen to me," she said softly. "No matter what happens, remember who you are. Remember each other." Osiris nodded, confused but trusting. Zara didn't cry. She stared at Julia with an intensity that made Max's chest ache. "They found us because you sang," Zara said. Julia smiled sadly. "I sang because it was time." Max opened his mouth to argue. The door exploded inward. They came through like a blade through cloth. The first man wore blackened steel, etched with sigils that seemed to writhe when they caught the firelight. He did not shout. Did not rush. He stepped inside as if he had been invited. Two more followed. Their presence crushed the air from the room. The ancestral songs Julia once hummed seemed to recoil, curling back into silence. "Julia of the Illir Valley," the first man said calmly, "by authority of the Concord, you are of designated unregistered lineage." Max lunged. The man did not move. Max hit an invisible wall and fell back hard, breath exploding from his lungs. Osiris screamed. Zara finally cried out, not in fear, but in fury. "You're not allowed," she shouted. The man tilted his head. "Interesting." Julia rose slowly, placing herself between them and the children. "You don't need to do this," she said. "The bloodline ends with me." The man smiled. "That's what we're here to confirm." The blade moved so fast Max didn't see it. Julia fell. The sound she made wasn't a scream. It was simply surprise. Max crawled to her, hands slipping in blood, his mind refusing to understand what his eyes were showing him. Her lips moved, shaping words meant only for him. "Sing," she mouthed. Then she was gone. Osiris ran to her. Max screamed his name, but too late. A second blade descended. Zara didn't run. She stepped forward, tears streaking her face, eyes blazing. "You're afraid," she said to the men. "That's why you kill us." The first man knelt, bringing himself level with her. "Child," he said gently, "fear keeps the world stable." He drew his blade. Max felt something inside him tear loose. A sound ripped from his throat, raw, animal, unformed. The walls shook. The sigils on the invader's armor flared in response, reacting to something they had not anticipated. Zara died smiling, not in peace, in defiance. The invaders stepped back. Not from Max, but from the air around him. The floor cracked beneath his hands. Dust and ash swirled, drawn toward him as if he were a wound in the world. For a single heartbeat, something answered him from far below the valley. Then, nothing. The lead man recovered first. "Leave him," he ordered. "The designation stands." One of the others hesitated. "Sir." "He's empty," the man said. "Let him live with it." They turned and walked out, stepping over bodies without looking down. The village burned. Night fell. Max did not move. He sat amid the ruin, Julia's body in his arms, Osiris and Zara cold beside her. The world felt distant, muted, like he was watching through water. When the fires died, silence returned. It was absolute. Max finally looked up at the stars. "I remember," he whispered. The earth beneath him stirred. Far away, sanctioned instruments recorded the anomaly. And somewhere beyond sight, something ancient and patient took note, not with urgency, but with interest. The Valley of Illir was erased, but the bloodline did not end. Chapter 4. What the Dead Leave Behind. Max buried them at dawn. There were no rites, no songs, no words left that felt worthy of the act. He worked with numb efficiency, digging into soil that still smelled of smoke and blood, his hands blistering and bleeding without protest. Julia beneath the old oak. Osiris at her right. Zara at her left. The earth accepted them without resistance. When it was done, Max sat for a long time, staring at the crude markers he had carved from fallen timber. He waited for something to happen. Tears, screams, collapse. Nothing came. Grief had not struck him like a storm. It hollowed him instead. The survivors left the valley by midday. Those who could walk gathered what little remained and followed the road south, toward cities that promised walls and sanctioned protection. They did not ask Max to come with them. No one met his eyes. Some feared him, others pitied him. A few whispered that the raiders had spared him because he was marked. Max did not care. He returned to the ruins of his cottage as the sun climbed higher. The hearth had collapsed inward, stone blackened and cracked. Among the ashes he found Julia's scarf, half burned, still carrying the faintest trace of her scent. He wrapped it around his wrist. That was all he took. He left Illir without a destination. At first, he followed the road like everyone else. Then, without consciously deciding to, he veered away, into the hills, toward the mountains rising blue and distant against the horizon. The pull was subtle, but constant. Not a voice. A memory that wasn't his. At night he dreamed of stone and roots, of symbols carved so deeply into the world they had become part of it. He dreamed of hands reaching upward from the earth, not begging but waiting. Each morning he woke colder. Hunger gnawed at him but never overcame him. His body endured on stubborn momentum alone. He passed through villages where people watched him warily, sensing something off about the way his shadow lagged half a breath behind his movements. Once, a sanctioned mage stopped him on the road. "You should turn back," the man said, hand resting casually on a rune-etched staff. "There's nothing in the mountains but old stone and older mistakes." Max looked past him, eyes unfocused. "I know," he said. The mage stepped aside. By the time Max reached the foothills, weeks had passed. The world thinned there, trees sparse, air sharp, sound swallowed by stone. Snow lingered in the shadows even under the sun. And beneath it all, beneath every footstep, was the sense of depth. Of layers. He collapsed at dusk before a rise of broken rock and half-buried pillars, their carvings worn smooth by centuries of neglect. The place felt abandoned in the way graves do, emptied of life, not meaning. Max fell to his knees. This time, the scream came. It tore out of him raw and unshaped, ripping through his chest and echoing off the stone like a wound splitting open. He struck the ground with his fists, again and again, until blood soaked into the soil. "I remember," he shouted into the dark. "I remember all of them." The earth answered, not with words, with pressure. The stone beneath him warmed, cracks spidered outward, glowing faintly gold and black. Symbols surfaced from beneath moss and snow, reasserting themselves as if they had never truly been forgotten. Voices rose, not individually, but as a chorus layered with centuries of grief. "You carry what was taken. You stand where we fell." Max did not recoil. "What do you want?" he demanded hoarsely. The ground split. Blood, not his, welled from carved channels in the stone, pulsing with slow, deliberate rhythm. "We want remembrance," the voices answered. "And we demand the price." Max laughed. It was a broken sound. "There's nothing left to take." The pressure increased, his vision blurred. Memories surged, Julia's laughter, Osiris's pride, Zara's defiant smile. The voices waited. Max pressed his forehead to the stone. "Then take me." Pain like fire and ice tore through him. The magic did not enter gently. It etched itself into him, into bone, into nerve, into memory. Each sensation was stripped down, weighed, and either consumed or burned deeper. He felt warmth leave him, felt mercy loosen its grip, felt his grief sharpen into something with edges. He screamed until his voice broke. And when he rose, the mountain recognized him. His shadow moved wrong. The air around him carried weight. The symbols beneath the stone dimmed, spent, for now. The voices receded, not gone, but settled. "Walk," they whispered, "and be remembered." Max stood alone beneath the stars, blood dried on his hands, Julia's scarf tight around his wrist. He did not look back at the valley. He turned toward the world. Chapter 5. The First Strike. Max walked alone, a shadow in a world that no longer felt his own. The mountains behind him had not just changed him, they had reshaped his understanding of power. Every step felt heavier than the last, though his legs were strong and uninjured. Something inside him had grown sharper, like a knife tempered in grief and fire. He did not speak. He did not sleep. He moved only when necessity demanded it, and necessity seemed to come looking for him wherever he went. The first village he came upon was on the brink of ruin. A war band had passed through weeks before, burning granaries and slaughtering livestock. The people left behind were starving, frightened, and unaware that the raiders might return. Max stepped into the square, silent, his boots leaving prints in the ash and mud. He felt it before he saw it, the weight of the villagers' fear pressing against him. He did not raise a hand, but instinctively the air around him shifted. The ground pulsed faintly beneath his feet, responding to the memory of pain, to the will inside him. A man with a dagger lurched toward a trembling woman and child. Max's eyes glowed faint gold. The man froze, unthinking, his muscles refusing command. "Move," Max said softly, and the man collapsed to the earth, unconscious. He did not touch him again. The magic had acted. It did not lie. It only reflected his intent and exacted its cost. He felt it immediately. Warmth left his chest, a faint dulling of the edges of memory. The screams of Julia, Osiris, and Zara flashed across his mind, not as pain, but as sharp, precise fuel. The magic demanded sacrifice. It always did. Max realized then what the cost of using the power was. It could protect, punish, heal, or destroy. But each act demanded a toll, a piece of himself, a piece of his humanity, or a piece of memory. Every choice had weight. Every strike left him emptier. He cared little. By nightfall, the village was safe, crops untouched, families huddled in homes once more. Wordlessly, Max left. No one thanked him. No one knew his name. But the night carried whispers. "Did you see him?" They say he saved us, without touching anyone. Stories traveled faster than roads. Over the next weeks, Max's reputation grew. Wherever injustice lingered, slavers, raiders, corrupt minor nobles, the air around them seemed to quiver. They reported unexplainable injuries, impossible deaths, shadows that moved without bodies. The people began calling him the Ashen Father, a name that clung to him like ash to stone. And somewhere, unseen, someone noted each incident. They did not intervene. They were patient. One evening, Max camped beside a river under the stars. He removed Julia's scarf and held it to his chest. Her scent, faint now, reminded him of what had been taken. "I am nothing," he whispered, letting the ancestral magic simmer within him. "I have nothing left. Only this." The water reflected him, not just his form, but his shadow, stretching in ways unnatural, stretching toward shapes that were not his own. The air whispered faintly, the voices of his ancestors murmuring, "You are becoming more than they allowed. You are remembered." Max closed his eyes, feeling the warmth leave him again. Each heartbeat was deliberate, heavy, necessary. Pain was no longer something to endure. It was fuel. And somewhere beyond the hills, beyond the sanctioned lands, something noticed. Not for confrontation, not yet, but as one watches the first stirrings of a storm that will one day reshape the world. The Ashen Father would not strike blindly. But the world, as it had allowed peace, would soon learn that vengeance walked among it. And those who had engineered the loss of his bloodline, who had erased history and sanctioned death, would see the first evidence of it. Max had become more than grief. He had become reckoning. Chapter 6. The Shape of Reckoning. Max walked beneath a sky bruised with smoke and clouds, the remains of the first villages he had touched with vengeance behind him. The valley had taught him one thing. Survival alone was meaningless. He needed purpose. And purpose demanded precision. The villages he passed were quiet, almost obedient. He had left no survivors among the raiders or slavers, none capable of revenge, none capable of asking why. Yet people whispered his name, the Ashen Father. It clung to him like ash in his hair, like dirt in his nails. The whispers reached ears he could not see, ears trained to notice anomalies, echoes of unregistered bloodlines, the faint signature of ancestral magic. Max felt them somewhere in the back of his mind, though he did not know who they were. They watched. He had no fear, only awareness. He tested his magic deliberately now, not to save, not to punish indiscriminately, but to control. At the edge of a hilltop town, he spotted 3 men threatening a family. Their swords glinted in the sun. Fear radiated from the family in pulses, sharp, immediate. Max stepped forward. He raised no hands, made no gesture. Yet the men froze, their muscles rigid, hearts pounding in ways that betrayed them to forces they could not see. The air around him thickened, gravity itself bending subtly to his will. He could feel the ancestral power coiling inside, each pulse drawing warmth and memory from him. He hesitated only briefly. "Leave," he said softly. The men obeyed. Not because they wanted to, but because they could not do otherwise. The family ran. Max's chest ached, not from exertion, but from the drain. Each act of magic left him emptier, colder. The laughter of Osiris, the defiance of Zara, Julia's voice, all shimmered at the edges of his mind. He pulled them close with thought, if only to remind himself that his cruelty had purpose. By night, he sat atop a hill overlooking the river, watching the flicker of villages below. The ancestral magic hummed faintly, thrumming in his bones, whispering of power and obligation. You are no longer a man. You are something more. Something remembered. He had begun to understand the rules of the power. Intent defines effect. The magic acts precisely on what the wielder wills. Memory fuels strength. Each strong emotion, each recollection of loss, feeds the spell. Sacrifice is constant. The more he wields it, the more pieces of himself fade. Warmth, patience, mercy. It demanded he choose. Every time he struck, he chose what part of himself to leave behind. Max did not care what he had left. The following weeks were deliberate. Wherever injustice lingered, he found it. Slavers, raiders, corrupt minor lords, none survived encounters with him. And each act was sharper, colder, cleaner than the last. Villagers spoke in hushed tones of the man who walked without shadow, whose eyes glimmered faintly gold, who punished wrongdoers without touching them. They began leaving offerings, not for him, but for luck, for protection. The Ashen Father was becoming a myth. But myths are watched. Far beyond the mountains, beyond the cities and the sanctioned lands, a pair of eyes followed the rumors. A figure moved across the maps of a terrace, marking shifts in power, noting surges of ancestral magic, watching as a broken man rebuilt himself into something dangerous. They did not act. Not yet. They only waited. One evening, Max sat alone by a frozen creek. The ancestral magic pulsed faintly beneath his skin, the rhythm like a heartbeat separate from his own. He touched the water with his hands, watching it ripple unnaturally. The reflection staring back at him was no longer just a man's face. The gold in his eyes glimmered. His shadow stretched wrong. And he realized something horrifying. He was not who he once had been. A part of him, the part that had loved, that had held his family, was gone. In its place was memory, grief, and power. The Ashen Father had been forged. And the world, which had permitted so much, would soon face him. Chapter 7. The Reckoning Begins. Max traveled south. The land changed beneath his feet, forests thickening into dark corridors, rivers widening into sluggish channels that mirrored gray skies. The ancestral magic stirred, sensing concentrations of injustice, drawing him toward the next wrong. A small village near a fortified city lay in ruin when he arrived. The survivors were huddled in shadows, afraid to light fires, afraid to speak. Max did not announce himself. He did not knock. He stepped into the square, and the air responded immediately. A gang of raiders prepared to torch the remaining homes. They did not see him until they were too close. Then the magic struck. It moved like water and steel, invisible yet unavoidable. Limbs froze mid-motion. Weapons clattered to the ground. Screams of frustration and fear echoed. And everywhere Max felt the ancestral magic drain from him, not painfully but deeply. He did not stop. The villagers watched silently, awe and terror mixing in their hearts. No one had approached the Ashen Father before. They felt the weight of his presence before they saw him. When the last raider fell unconscious, Max turned away. He did not speak, did not look back. The village would survive. The magic would protect them for now. But as he walked toward the city, he knew the Watchers were closer now. Those who had orchestrated the massacre of Illir Valley, the sanctioned authorities, would soon take note. Max's chest ached with memory, with longing, with grief. But it also pulsed with anticipation. The reckoning would come. The Ashen Father was no longer just a man. He was vengeance, memory, and the echo of a bloodline erased. And the world, which had allowed so much, would soon learn that nothing remains hidden forever.